You're listening to a podcast from the Brain Hub, a podcast in which we explore the theme of neurodiversity with a variety of guests. What does this theme mean for our guests in everyday life? How does neurodiversity influence the way our guest thinks, feels, and works? Do they encounter obstacles? And what are the right strategies for dealing with them? We also take a closer look at the workplace. Is there enough room for different ways of thinking? What could be improved? And what steps are needed to create a more inclusive way of working? In this fourth episode, I, Marije Pietersma, speak with Tristan Lavender. Tristan is an award-winning speaker on neurodiversity, workplace inclusion, and creating environments where different ways of thinking can thrive. Thank you so much for joining us, Tristan.
Thanks for having me, Marije.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you the most cliche podcast question ever. But for the people listening, who are you?
So I work as an independent speaker and consultant focusing on neurodiversity at work. And I do that alongside a corporate role within a large international organization, where I also founded and led their neurodiversity network for 3 years. So that has also given me a lot of insight into what is actually needed to make neuroinclusion a reality within an organization.
That's interesting. That's a lot of roles altogether.
For sure, yes.
Yeah. And, well, I follow you on LinkedIn and I know a tiny bit about you. And we have in common that we both have an autism diagnosis.
Yep.
And you were diagnosed in your early 20s, right? But
that's true, yeah.
You kept it hidden at work.
Yep.
And what finally changed?
Good question.
To disclose.
So
Thank you.
The reason that I never felt comfortable sharing my diagnosis at work, but to be honest, I didn't even feel comfortable sharing it in my private life with most people, was that I just carried a lot of shame and fear because I was always worried that if people knew about me that I was autistic, that they would think less of me. And I was also worried, for example, that if I brought it up during a job interview, that I would definitely be rejected for the role because of the stereotypes that are still associated with a label like autism.
He must be Rain Man.
For example, that is probably a best case scenario. So that's why I kept it to myself for all those years. I think what changed for me over time is that I learned to appreciate that while being autistic comes with challenges, which can be very debilitating, I learned to appreciate that it also comes with strengths that can actually add a lot of value also at work. So 4 years ago, I arrived at a stage in my life where I felt more comfortable with who I am.
Yeah.
And that is when I also felt the moral responsibility to start sharing my story in the hope that it would help others also in feeling more comfortable opening up about their differences and ultimately reduce the stigma around labels like autism.
And what comes to mind now, who was the first person at work you told, you disclosed your diagnosis?
Well, I was very lucky to have a manager that I felt very safe with.
Yeah.
So I initially shared it with my manager. I'd already known her for years. So that felt like a natural starting point. But when I shared it with her, I already had made up my mind, like, I'm going to take this step by step. But after I'd shared it with my manager, I shared it with the wider team. And then I also shared it on LinkedIn with the whole with the whole world.
And hello world, there I am.
Yes. So.
And how did people react?
Well, I must say that the response was overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah.
Because my colleagues, of course, many of my colleagues weren't entirely surprised because they already worked with me for many years, so they knew about some of my strengths, but also some of my challenges. And I think a lot of people in my wider network also responded in a very positive and supportive way because there are so many people who are neurodivergent who still struggle with being open about their differences, who carry the same shame and fear. So I think when I shared my story, I just realized just how many people were experiencing the same struggles.
There's so many people.
Yep.
Yeah. And you then started an internal neurodiversity network within your organization. And you led it for about 3 years?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, and what motivated you the most to start this network?
Well, I realized that, as I just said, when I started sharing my story, it resonated with a lot of people in my network, including colleagues. So a lot of colleagues reached out to me and said, like, hey, I can relate to some of the things that you shared, but I don't feel comfortable addressing this with my manager or with my coworkers. So that is when I sensed that there was a huge need for an internal community, a platform within our organization where people could come together and find a safe space where they could share their experiences and learn from each other. So that, for me, was the primary drive to start this network.
How did you start? I mean, there comes a day and then you think, okay, I'm going to start. But how do you start?
So what I did is I created an online community within our organization, because anyone in the organization can do that. It's just a matter of creating a community and then inviting people. We started posting content on the topic. We started posting questions to invite people's feedback and learn more about people's needs and pain points. So that is how we started. And then we started engaging in internal conversations with our diversity and inclusion team to get also organizational support for the network. And that is what ultimately led to us also being recognized as an employee resource group and getting more organizational support as well.
Yeah. And is there an experience that comes to mind? Or no, how can I say that? What did you experience while creating this network?
Well, as I said, I think that need that I saw for community, that was such a strong need that we saw a very rapid growth of our network.
Yeah.
So when I started this online community, initially it was maybe just 10 people, but
and now
we ultimately grew to over 1,300 members in the time that I led the network. So I think
it was all very positive.
Yeah,
and
I think
people were really looking for an internal network.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think what I also quickly sensed within the community is that when people started gathering together, when they started feeling more safe to share their experiences, people also felt empowered to have more open conversations with their manager, with their coworkers, because they didn't feel as alone anymore. Because what you might recognize yourself, so many of us who are neurodivergent have felt very alone and isolated for a big part of our lives, including in organizations.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Yeah.
Feeling like you're no longer the only one, but you're part of a community, I think is also really empowering about having such an internal network.
It reminds me of a former colleague. He came to my desk and he said, "I'm so glad you're working here. Yeah. I'm one of yours."
Exactly, yeah. So finding your tribe.
Yeah, finding your tribe. Yeah, absolutely. Well, nowadays, neurodiversity is kind of like a hot topic. And a lot of companies say that they support the neurodivergent people and they work neuro-inclusive. What's your thought about that? What do you think a real neuro-inclusion looks like?
Yeah, great question. What I quickly learned also from speaking with people in our community is that it's ultimately the line manager who can really make or break their experience. And many in our organization, we're lucky to have a line manager who understood them, who supported them, but not everyone was so lucky. Yeah. There's also actually, there's a great research report by EY which calls this the line manager lottery.
Oh,
And I think that's a great way of describing it. And I think ultimately, as an organization, you want to get to a point where it doesn't depend on luck, whether you have the right manager or not. You want to ensure that all managers in an organization feel equipped to support every team member, including neurodivergent team members. And from my experience, a lot of managers, they want to do the right thing. They want to better support neurodivergent colleagues, but they might not feel sure how to support them. There's also a lot of fear often in managers about, I might get it wrong, because it's such a sensitive topic for them as well. Yeah. So I think to answer your question, neuroinclusion at work for me is really about supporting managers so that they can better support their team members, including neurodivergent ones. And that requires a lot of education to help them better understand how they can work with people's individual strengths, but also how they can support their needs and challenges.
Yeah, and that they have to be curious.
Exactly.
And ask questions.
Yes, exactly.
I think that's one of the most important things that people don't assume. Oh, he's autistic, so he must he can't really work with other people, and he has to be in a room by himself in the dark.
I think
being a vampire.
Exactly. I think you're hitting on a crucial point there, because what I often see, and again, this happens with the best of intentions, so I'm not saying this to blame managers in any way, but there's this often indeed this misconception of, oh, there is like a manual for how I should support someone with ADHD
A from autistic.
or with dyslexia.
Yeah.
While to your point, it's much more about being curious, taking the time to understand that person's strengths, needs, and challenges, and these are different for each individual.
Neurodivergent or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's another crucial point, I think. And this is also how we framed the topic as a network, which I think resonated very well in our organization, that this is not just about supporting a specific group of people. This is ultimately about creating a work environment where we don't expect everyone to operate in the same way, but where we support people to work in ways that work best for them and for how their brain works.
Yeah. And then you have to be really curious as a manager.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also recognize that your way of thinking, your way of communicating might not be, it's not the standard. People in your team may prefer to communicate or work in different ways. So it also requires that self-awareness that different people work in different ways.
Yeah. Because I know that, and it's not in this company, but also in my previous company, where people said, okay, can we work from home? Because then I have a lot more energy and I can do a lot more work. And the manager said, no, I just want everybody in the same place, so that's for the group, it's better. And
that's a very common
I know,
pattern.
But it's not, because you want to keep the people in the group, and you don't want them to stay at home because they're ill or burned out or whatever. Yeah. So
indeed, and that's a great example indeed, where it requires also this self-awareness to reflect on: is this actually better for the team?
Yeah.
Or am I just essentially projecting my need and my preference on others whose brains may work in very different ways?
Yeah. But to realize that.
It does require a certain open mind and curiosity indeed to also explore with your team, but what are actually their needs and preferences. And then it might actually turn out that the majority of them prefer to work in an office.
Yeah, of course.
But don't assume that, just ask those questions first.
We talked a bit about stigma, and you talk a lot about turning stigma into strength. And what are some strengths of neurodivergent thinking that organizations still underestimate today?
It's a good question, and my answer is a nuanced one, because I think, again, the pitfall here is that we assume, well, all autistic people have these strengths, all people with ADHD have these strengths. And again, this is highly individual. And I think what's been great about the neurodiversity movement as a whole is that we now much more acknowledge that neurodivergent people have strengths, just like anyone else. But I think we
just
also
like other people.
Exactly.
We're all human.
Exactly. But I think at the same time, we also need to be careful not to create new stereotypes. And that's why I personally also really dislike superpower narratives.
I know.
Because that also places a lot of pressure on neurodivergent people to live up to impossible standards.
Yeah.
So I think, again, it's about being curious to understand what an individual, what the strengths of an individual team member are. But, you know, what you see in research is that there are certain strengths that a lot of neurodivergent people bring to the table, and that can include, for example, having a strong eye for detail or being able to focus very strongly on a specific topic. So there are certain strengths, I think, that a lot of neurodivergent people can bring to the table. But again, it's also important as an employer that you recognize that there are often pitfalls that come with these strengths as well, because someone
Leak
may
of
be able
energy.
to, someone may be able to hyper-focus
Yeah.
on a project or a task, but that may also put them at the risk of burnout if you don't help them create the right boundaries. So it's not as clear
That sounds
cut.
pretty familiar.
It's not as clear cut as some of the feel good memes that you see on social media, where every person with ADHD is a fantastic out of the box thinker, and every autistic person is this amazing pattern seeker.
Yeah.
It's much more complex than that in reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you could change one widespread misconception about autism and neurodiversity overnight, what would it be?
So I recently wrote about one misconception that I see a lot about autistic people specifically, and one that I personally also always find quite painful when I hear people say this. So there's this common misperception that autistic people lack empathy.
Oh, yeah, I know. Don't get me started on that one. I'm sorry, but I heard, it was last week, and I heard someone say, oh, I can't believe that there are so many children growing up with one or two autistic parents. Okay, that's true. But what about it? Yeah, and that's why. And they can't disclose their feelings, and they haven't learned, and their mothers don't have empathy. And whoa, wow. Yeah. Hello, refrigerator mother, 1956, whatever.
These are very harmful misconceptions.
Definitely.
And again, we need to be careful not to speak in overgeneralizations here, because there are a lot of autistic people who do genuinely struggle with empathy.
Yeah, but there are also a lot of other people who don't, who have lack of empathy. So yeah.
Exactly, because, just if I reflect on my own personal experience as it relates to empathy, I pay a lot of attention to other people's feelings, and I put a lot of effort into understanding them and approaching them with kindness and with understanding. But that does require a lot of conscious effort of me, and also often a lot of processing time. So when someone expresses an emotion to me, I may not always be able to respond on the spot. I may be able to respond a day later when I have fully processed. What
3 weeks later.
Exactly, or a year later. So
remember that happened? That was last year. Yeah, I feel for you.
So we may express empathy differently or on a different timeline.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we don't have empathy. And again, this is different for each individual. But I think it's so important that people learn to see and appreciate these nuances into what it actually means to be autistic in this case.
Yeah. I've just remembered that a psychologist said to me a couple of years ago, you can't be autistic because you told me that your daughter fell and she had to go to the hospital and get stitches, and you felt really bad for her.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's my daughter, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, she had a
and it's
very
quite
old theory.
And that a professional would say this is, I think, quite concerning.
Of course, yeah. Thank you. Let me see, one more question. What do you tell people who are struggling with disclosing or not their neurodivergence in the workplace? What do you tell them? Should they? Shouldn't they?
The answer is it depends. Because I think whether people feel comfortable sharing their neurodivergence at work depends on a lot of factors, both that are internal to the person, but also that depend
also
on
the line manager.
Exactly. External factors that depend on their environment. So I've spoken to a lot of neurodivergent people who just prefer to keep it to themselves and maybe only share it in a family setting, just because they feel it's a very private part of who they are.
Yeah,
and they simply
it's a medical diagnosis.
Yeah, they simply prefer not to share it with their colleagues or their manager. They may also not see a need to share it with others, especially people who are maybe already a bit more established in their careers and who have just found their way of managing their neurodivergence at work. They may not see the added value of sharing their neurodivergence with others. So why take the risk? Yeah. And I think that's a very valid,
absolutely,
a valid rationale or choice for people not to share their diagnosis. And, I said there are also, I think, a lot of external factors to consider. Like, is my environment going to be receptive to me sharing this? Is there a risk in me sharing this? And again, it can be a very valid choice in certain contexts to say the risk is simply too big, so I'm not going to share this. In all honesty, if I were to go back in time to the moment that I applied for my current job, which is roughly 10 years ago, even though I work in a very caring and inclusive organization, I didn't share it at the time because I simply didn't want to take the risk. And of course, now that I've shared my story publicly, there's no way back. But if I were to go back in time, I probably would make the same choice again, because why take that risk if it's not strictly necessary? But on the other hand, I also speak with neurodivergent people who've had poor experiences with previous employers and who have now arrived at a stage in their career where they feel that it's just vital to be open from the start, from the moment that they apply for a job, and to request accommodations already, for example, during a job interview, because if they don't, they may risk ending up in a situation again where, again, they won't receive the right support. So if you feel...
eventually burnout.
Exactly. So it can also be a conscious choice to say, no, I want to work for an employer that gets it, that's going to support me. So I'm going to be open from the start. So there are all sorts of considerations that go into that decision of, am I going to share this with others if not?
Yeah, and Evelien Brouwers, she's a professor.
Yes, I've worked with her.
Yeah, she's doing research about that disclosure part.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So I don't think I think it's really important that we create the conditions in organizations for people to be open if they want to, but we should never put pressure on anyone to open up if they're not ready for it, if for whatever reason it's a conscious choice to keep it to themselves.
Yeah. Just a private question. I noticed from your LinkedIn profile that you're also a really good photographer. And what gives you the most energy when you're photographing?
Well, thank you for the kind words, first of all. It's really interesting how photography was actually a vital part of my journey learning to accept myself as a person. Because what I learned through my photography are some of my strengths, which I also apply in my corporate work. So the kind of photography that I do, which is landscape photography, really benefits from having a strong eye for detail. It benefits from being able to focus for a very long time on just one scene, because in landscape photography you have to be in the right place at the right time, and you need to feel comfortable with just waiting for 2 hours until the light
is perfect.
Exactly. Yes. So I actually learned through my photography some of my autistic strengths. I learned to appreciate these strengths more and lean into them. So it really gave me a language to express myself. So it has really been a big part of my journey of self-acceptance.
And how often do you go out and wait for the perfect light?
Well, I often do that when I'm traveling. So it's since I have a busy work life, it's not like I get to do it every week. But whenever I travel abroad, I always try to
sneak out and find a time.
Yes, and I'll do a lot of preparation already at home.
Okay.
Just to map out where I want to be, and that is something that gives me a lot of joy and fulfillment.
Yeah, nice. Is there anything, as the last question, you would like to say to employers about neurodiversity, or
I think
anything else you want to say?
Well, I think one point, and we already touched on this during our conversation, that I'd really like to emphasize again is that what I see is that a lot of organizations still approach this as a bit of a niche topic. This is about a specific...
For us, it's a big topic. I mean, it's everywhere, but other companies,
but I see that a lot of organizations still approach it as I said, as a way of supporting a very specific group of people. And in a way that is, of course, very important, because it is important that whether it's people with ADHD or those with dyslexia or any other form of neurodivergence receive the right support, adjustments where needed. But I think ultimately there's a bigger need and opportunity here for organizations to adopt what is often referred to as universal design, where it's much more about recognizing that each individual has different needs and challenges, and that if we're able to design workplaces and design how we collaborate in ways that allow everyone to participate, then it doesn't just support those who are neurodivergent, but it actually elevates the whole team, the whole organization. Yeah. And I think that is where the bigger opportunity for organizations lie. And that is also often what I hear back when I have conversations with people who are not neurodivergent. So for example, if I can just give you one practical example.
Yes, please.
As an autistic person, I really benefit from having meeting agendas, pre-reads. I mean, you kindly shared questions with me ahead of this interview, which was tremendously helpful. Because otherwise I would have felt...
I'm also not very good at freestyling. So
I would have felt quite uncomfortable addressing questions on the spot if I had no idea what you were going to ask me.
Yeah, what's she asking?
Yeah. So I will typically be the one in team meetings asking my manager or the person who's leading the meeting, could you please share an agenda and any other available pre-reads ahead of time? Yeah. But what then often happens is that actually colleagues reach out to me afterwards and say, oh, thank you for asking that, because I benefit from being able to prepare as well. And they might not be autistic. They might be introverted or, could be...
But it's good for everybody.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think having more open conversations about this ultimately benefits everyone. Yeah. Because it makes people feel safer to have those conversations that we've historically just often not had in organizations.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marijn.
Ja, thank you very much, Tristan. Je luisterde naar de podcast van The Brain Hub. Wij hopen dat je hier met plezier naar hebt geluisterd. Meer informatie over ons of onze diensten kun je vinden op thebrainhub.nl. Daarnaast zijn wij actief op LinkedIn en Instagram. Je vindt de linkjes in onze bio of in onze Linktree. Wil je deze podcast delen met je netwerk? Dat stellen wij zeer op prijs. Want alleen samen zetten we grotere stappen in het creëren van een neuro-inclusieve samenleving.